one of the votes that you talk about bearing the weight was the death penalty debate.
Big one.
I never thought in a million years that I would have to make that decision my first year in Topeka.
Right.
I knew at some point maybe, but it's been something that I have struggled with. Okay, and I've thought about this for a number of years even before this. Capital punishment is the ultimate finality, right? There's no room for error when it comes to the death penalty.
Right.
Somebody that's in prison, you can let back out, but there's no room for error on the death penalty. So as we sat there and as we heard testimony from all the people that were proponents for abolishing the death penalty, there were people that were victims of crimes that were standing their support, in support of abolishing it. There were people from, various church groups that were in support of abolishing it. There were people that made arguments about how physically inefficient that process is, because we actually spend more to put somebody to death and to keep them on death row than we do just to put them on life in prison without parole.
Right.
You take all of that into consideration, but then we heard from law enforcement that wanted to keep the death penalty in place because it's a deterrent. We heard from judges that want to keep it in place because it's an important option. Even though nobody's been put to death in Kansas since, I believe it was 1966 or 1964, the option to do that is still very important. I'll never forget one gentleman that we heard from whose daughter was murdered, who stood right in front of us and said, please don't take this away. This is the only reason that we can sleep at night, is knowing that person that did that to my daughter is going to die. The ultimate price for what he did and what he took. So how do you weigh all that? I'll tell you, we knew the vote was coming in committee because it was heard in committee and it gets voted on in committee. And then depending on what happens there, whether it goes to the floor for a whole debate or not. There are 13 people that sit on the corrections committee. And by the time we got to that point and made that final vote, I was so emotionally drained, having processed it, having thought through it, again, asking those questions from a religious standpoint, a moral standpoint, an ethical standpoint, and just all of these points, that when it came down to it, I was not prepared to take that option off the table. That doesn't mean that at some point in the future, that might not change.
Right.
But I can tell you at that time, after working through all of it, there were 6 people that wanted it abolished, and there were 6 people that wanted it left in place. Rarely does it come to a tie.
Right.
The only time that a chairman of a committee votes is when it's a tie. And when we had a 6-6 split tie, it tells you just how, and it wasn't a partisan vote. It wasn't a Democrat-Republican vote. These are just people weighing a very important thing. And ultimately the chairman voted to keep it in place as well.
Wow.
So with a vote of 7-6, it died in committee.
Wow. And that's one.
That's
decision.
one. That's just one decision. Now that was a hard one.
Yeah.
And there are 4 or 5 or 6 super, super difficult ones that we have to make every year. Some of them are pretty straightforward. We need to technical fix in this statute or need to adjust some of that stuff's pretty straightforward. Still got to research it, but some of that's so draining. And I took the time to actually not only write out my explanation of why and post that online, but I took a video of myself in the Capitol. Because I want people, again, to really understand and to feel it. Some people think we go up there, we live the life of luxury, we're getting wined and dined all the time, everything's happy and hunky-dory and good. Well, that's not the case, right? We're getting paid $88 a day for our time.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, we get food paid for, thankfully, because at $88 a day, there's not a lot there. And we do get a per diem, which is great for those that live more than 60 miles away. But there is so much time and emotional energy spent in making these decisions because we realize that. And I don't know a single person on that committee that didn't weigh on that day. And so I wanted to be very open and share that video because my office assistant even said, man, you just look wore out. And it's because I was.
Right.
And it was over a very difficult decision. So just
Yeah.
share a little bit about that, because that is this process. It is such an honor, like I said earlier, to be there. It's humbling to walk in those steps of the people before me, to take that responsibility on me. But no matter how exhausting it is, no matter how tired you get, you keep pushing forward because you want what's best for the state of Kansas. And I'm just so honored to be there and to be part of the process. It's crazy.